Okay, so we have our industrial real estate update. Um, Bill Waxman had a last-minute personal matter that he had to attend to, so he will not be joining us today. But his colleague, Tim Tucci, will take his place on the agenda. So I'm going to introduce the speakers first, and Sophia will manage the questions and answer portion once the presentations have concluded. So our first speaker, as I mentioned, is Tom Tucci. Tom is vice chairman at Cushman and Wakefield. He co-leads a 17-person industrial team that is perennially ranked as the #1 industrial team in the world for C&W. Beyond the global rankings, Tom is the former president of SIOR's New Jersey chapter and a leader in Cushman's 3PL advisory group. After that, our next speaker is Walter Lane. I think we all know Walter. He serves as the executive director of the New Jersey Office of Planning Advocacy, where he supports the State Planning Commission and staff to advance implementation of the State Development and Redevelopment Plan and works on a wide range of smart growth planning efforts. He has over 27 years of land use, regional planning, and transportation planning experience and has managed numerous award-winning projects. He is a graduate of Cook College, Rutgers University, and holds a BS in environmental policy. So I'm going to ask that Tom get us started.
Thank you very much. And as Steve mentioned, I'm filling in for Bill, so apologies if I glance over some of these slides and whatnot, but let's get started. All right, so I guess Bill wanted to start off with the hottest topic that we've experienced in 2025, which was tariffs. Honestly, it was a lot of just noise. We didn't really see much of an impact, other than it was a lot of delayed decision-making. Tenants used it as a way to drag on conversations. Landlords used it as a leveraging tool, but honestly, most took advantage of the uncertainty to just delay their decision-making during an entire year that had just uncertainties throughout. The groups that were affected mostly were in the furniture industries, groups that had very small margins or that just didn't have a lot of domestic supply on our shores, that were really threatened by the tariffs. But we can move to the next slide. Another hot topic, Bill just hitting me with left and right, Asian supplied 3PLs. Okay, so as everyone knows, Asian-based 3PLs used to be called Chinese-based 3PLs. Without them, we would be in a very difficult and different place in the market. They have basically absorbed a lot of the demand that we didn't have post-COVID. They have accounted for close to 40% of all Class A leasing activity in 2025. They are continuing to grow, albeit they've been doing different size deals as they're growing out their last mile supply chain. Our team specifically did about 37 of them, I want to say, in New Jersey last year. We've done 88 across the country last year. They're not going anywhere. They're going to continue to be a force to reckon with. They're looking to take over a lot of USPS's business and the small parcel delivery, where they are probably got more investment coming in the next few years. They put in a lot of conveyor systems, automation facilities, that domestic 3PLs just can't compete with at the time being. One challenge I will say a lot of these Chinese-based 3PLs are having is that their financial balance sheets are not strong. So the capital markets are having trouble underwriting their deals if they were to lease a building and then the ownership wanted to sell it at a later date. There has been issues in other parts, in other markets, and other places in the country. We haven't seen that yet here in New Jersey, but we're starting to hear rumblings that landlords are pushing away from these tenants, just strictly because it becomes a capital problem. Moving on, we're going to head into some industrial trends. Okay, so this is a slide that probably most of you understand and can grasp, but essentially it tells us that the closer you are to the Port Newark, the higher your rent's going to be. And then as tenants are evaluating their hub and spoke model or their distribution facilities compared to their last mile facilities, that's when the conversation of drayage costs versus rent comes into play. Back during COVID, container rates were through the roof. Container rates have now significantly come down. So this conversation has, this equation has come into question a little bit less these days as tenants have searched for facilities out in Eastern PA, Southern New Jersey, down the Turnpike corridor as they are, growing out their supply chain. We are starting to see tenants come back to the port area more. However, it is more about right size as opposed to right location, which I'm pretty sure we are going to have some slides later on to discuss. So this is an interesting slide and one that Bill and I actually collaborated on for a recent presentation. Historically, and you would see as the vacancy rate falls, your asking rents will go up. Well, what we saw was that during COVID, our vacancy rate was actually increasing, not because of the lack of leasing activity, but because we had a wealth of new developments that delivered during COVID. We had two of the highest years on record for new developments of Class A facilities, and we didn't have a growing supply of or growing leasing demand. So we actually saw an inverse of what we would typically see. We saw rents continue to climb. We saw vacancy rates continuing to climb. Now that we've kind of flattened out our new supply and we're seeing new supply on the market year over year now dropping, we're starting to see now the rents stabilizing and we're getting to a more, I would say, return to normalcy. So prior to 2021, it was typical market conditions. That 2 year or 2.5 year period during COVID completely shocked the market, created an imbalance. Now we're seeing that return to normalcy, and we're seeing that across all markets in New Jersey. And then moving on, we'll see this slide. If I could have overlaid rents on that last slide, I probably would have also seen the numbers. But this shows Class A versus Class B. So Class B properties would be your second or third generation properties. They're indicated in the black bars. Class A would be your newer construction buildings, think 36-foot clear and higher. That's in your green bars. What this is showing you is that we've had great absorption levels in Class A throughout the years. And what we're seeing is negative absorption in the Class B properties. Essentially, tenants want a flight to quality. They want the newer, bigger, prettier buildings for better efficiencies. They're able to rack higher, take smaller footprints. They get better parking ratios. They get modern efficiencies with lighting and wider column spacing. All the stuff that is needed nowadays to compete with modern technology that's being rolled out for 3PLs. This trend is probably going to continue, and it is going to put a strain on ownership of Class B buildings who might have longer vacancy times, who might need to spend significant capital to either raise their roof or do other improvements to their building to create tenancy. Deal terms. Okay, so as you saw during COVID in that previous slide, we saw a 30% year-over-year increase in rental rates during COVID for 3 consecutive years. So rents essentially doubled from 21 to 24. Now landlords are stuck with these high numbers in their minds. They have high vacancy numbers, but they have to promise to their investors that they need to still hit those same very high, lofty rent numbers, even though there's no appetite from it from the tenant community. What happened is that they got very creative with their deal terms. And I think we have another slide coming up later to dive into this deeper, but basically landlords have been offering significant amount of concessions, free rent, lower annual escalations, and a ton of tenant improvement dollars to incentivize them to come and pay a higher rent. For them, face value of the rent is all that matters. So they'll offer millions of dollars in concessions for the tenants to come and tenant their buildings. And then you can see on the right, the amount of average free rent that has been given on these deals has slowly increased. I recently just did a transaction where there was a year month of free rent. I have not seen this since before the great financial crisis, where we used to give away 12, 14 months of free rent. Then again, the rents back then were around $2 to $4. Now we're seeing, you can't get a deal at less than 12 anywhere in New Jersey for Class A. So flipping through. Okay, so this is sublease. So subleases every year affect the market, more so when landlords are really trying to hold rental rates high. When they're trying to hold them high, subleases come in and they can undercut the market. This wasn't a big of a demand or bigger issue last year and the year prior. M&A activity was pretty low across the board in New Jersey and the country. Now with the federal government's looser regulations, I believe M&A activity will pick up. With that comes a lot of consolidations. It comes with PE firms coming in and saying, we're going to, cut occupancy costs across the board in an OpCo, and we're just going to, relocate you out of state or go to a lower cost state. We'll probably see more sublease space come on the market. We do track it, as you can see here, because it does affect our numbers. It does create problems where tenants can come in and take short-term Band-Aid solutions for their operations. But it's something to watch for. Nothing really here to call out other than, probably, there's not as much as in years past. But this might continue. All right. So my uncle used to have a boat. He used to tow around New Jersey to go fishing. It was a 10 to 12 foot boat, and it used to call, and it was size doesn't matter was the name of his boat. I can tell you right now, in real estate, size does matter, and it matters a lot, especially right now. And if you are and I'll use a round number, 150,000 square foot or 200,000 square foot tenant right now, looking around the port market, you're going to have a host of options. If you're looking for 50,000 square feet, you have very few. And that's where size matters. So we're seeing significant rental growth in the smaller size ranges, what we would call, your shallow bay industrial, which is, sub 25,000 square feet. Vacancy is really tight. We're seeing significant rent growth. As you get larger, we're not seeing as much rent growth. Then it drops down between 500 to 1 million square feet. It's only a host of properties right now that are available in the entire state of New Jersey, and most of them have active deals on them. So right now, if you're a new developer coming into a market, these are the numbers that you look to see. You never want to build for, no tenant. You want to build for the market. And right now, the sweet spot has been either very large, 500,000 square feet and greater, or I would say, sub 75,000 square feet has seen the best traction, the best deals. Everything in the middle has been a little choppy. All right, so I touched upon this before, but this is all about new construction. I discussed earlier, and it's probably really hard to see. I'm trying to look in there too, but what you're seeing in that middle left chart is the beginning of COVID running up those 2 years of significant high. This was unbelievable high amount of new construction delivery. And then now, obviously, it just completely drops off the face of the earth. And now we're getting back to a sign of normalcy. I'm hearing left and right, New Jersey is very difficult to put a shovel in the ground in. This is high barrier to entry market. When on our national calls, there's only, three more locations where everybody says is really difficult. It's California, New Jersey, and like Miami, right? Are the only three places where it's really tough to put a shovel in the ground. This is going to continue. The only thing I will say is I would, and this probably doesn't come into the new construction stats, as those Class B properties become more and more obsolete and Class C properties, this might tick up and we might start seeing more redevelopment of older facilities. I know up here in the Meadowlands where I'm sitting now, I'm talking to the NJSCA directly about a few sites that they're going to earmark to get redeveloped in the Patterson Plank Road redevelopment plan. I would say that's most owners right now, most developers are looking at what they can redevelop as opposed to your typical greenfield sites. Okay. So we don't have a crystal ball. Clearly, everyone's crystal ball broke during COVID, but I will say there's a very large consensus across my colleagues here at Cushman, JLL, CBRE, you name it, that 2026 is going to be the year where we return to normalcy. 2027 is where we will see growth and the pendulum swing back to be in favor of the landlords. It's not anything special other than looking at the numbers, and it's a simple supply demand equation here. We're not going to have as much Class A supply in 2027. Asian 3PLs will continue to lease those facilities. We have a significant amount of leases rolling in 2026 and 2027 from the leases that were signed during COVID. So all this new demand being funneled into the market with supply at a very low state will create a more landlord favorable market. And this is just showing the equilibrium that we're seeing as the vacancy rate and your asking rates are starting to come back to more normal times. As you can see, kind of running up in the early part of the chart. I wish it would have showed 17, 18, and 19, but you saw a little bit more normalcy there, got completely out of whack. Now we're seeing back that equilibrium. So tenants in the market, you hear me talk a lot about 3PLs, whether they're domestic or they're China-based, and for good reason. They typically are about 40 to 50% of all tenants in the market for New Jersey. It's no secret. They drive the market in every way. So every developer is going to go out there and develop a new building with them in mind. One of the other big food groups, yes, pun intended, is food and beverage. They are growing. New Jersey has a fairly obsolete cold storage network in the state compared to maybe Phoenix or Chicago or other markets that have more newer facilities. There's a bunch of large tenants floating around for 200,000 to 300,000 square feet needing modern cold infrastructure. It's highly specialized. And I probably will say food and beverage, that pie or that slice of the pie will continue to grow. Manufacturing hasn't really come back. Life sciences ticks up every once in a while. But a bulk of your tenants that are in the market will always be, 3PLs. Hopefully the consumer market comes back as well. And then your food and beverage, supplying the consumer base here in the tri-state. Industrial trends. Kind of don't want to sound too repetitive here. But if I had to highlight, some summary ones, I would say there's going to be a true flight to quality. All your tenants in Class B, C, D properties will want newer Class A facilities. Construction deliveries will probably start falling off. I could see the tightening of supply in the next 6 to 8 months, going into 27, where we will continue to see record demand, and that will create a landlord favorable environment. The window to make new deals, if you are a tenant, is starting to close with high concessions. No longer will they be seeing 5, 6, 7, 8 months of free rent. That will also start compressing. And we'll probably start seeing real rental growth for landlords in 27. Unless it's a right size for the market, which is what we discussed before, the 75,000 square feet and under, and the 500,000 square feet and greater size range. Oh, there's my summary slide. See if I missed anything else, but I think that was pretty much it. One thing I will say, which is nice to see in the market, is Amazon has been back to the market in a big way. They've been quiet and sitting on the sidelines for a few years now. They just executed a 500,000 square foot lease in Jersey City. They just executed another almost 500,000 square foot deal out in Morris County. They're under contract with another 1,000,000 square foot building. They have RFPs out in Bergen County for another 3, 4, 500,000 square feet on the former Mondelez site, Nabisco site, however how old you are. So having them back to the market is creating a new benchmark for a lot of tenants. It's also putting a lot of certainty back to tenants' mind that if Amazon's willing to invest and grow within the state into more modern facilities, typically that tailwind will come back, and you'll see others to support that business. Hopefully, retailers will come back. So I'll leave you there. Any questions I can answer for anyone?
We'll do questions at the end.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're going to we'll hear from Walter, and then we will do questions, both of you, if that works. When Walter's done with his presentation. So with that, excuse me, I'm going to turn it over to you, Walter.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm here today to talk about the State Development Redevelopment Plan. As you may have heard, we adopted a new plan for the first time in 24 plus years back in December. So if you go to the next slide, just as a little bit of background, so the Office of Planning Advocacy is located within the Department of State. So on behalf of Lieutenant Governor and Secretary of State, Dr. Dale Caldwell, thank you for the opportunity to present today. So just to give you a little bit of background before we get into the plan about where OPA sits, we are in the Business Action Center. If you pick the next slide. The Business Action Center has been around for a while. We are an organization within the Department of State that's really geared towards helping businesses of all sizes grow in New Jersey and address various technical assistance needs and customer service and resources with the goal of creating and supporting a vibrant economy in New Jersey and creating jobs and employment opportunities for all our residents. Next slide. The Business Action Center has a couple of different offices. So we have our Business Advocacy Office. They're really the economic development site selector group. They work with companies, large, medium, and small, looking for space in New Jersey, either for new space to grow existing businesses and expand. We have an Office of Export Promotion where we work with our companies to grow their opportunities to export goods and services overseas. Our Business Advocacy group really mans our call center. So if you call the 1-800-business number through the state and have a question of how do I file or find this form, or where do I file these tax forms, and so on and so forth, all those types of questions, or what grant opportunities are for energy improvements, that group answers all those calls. They answer hundreds of calls a day and provide those resources to our large and medium and small businesses. There's our office. We are the support staff to the State Planning Commission, and the State Planning Commission is charged with adopting and implementing the State Development and Redevelopment Plan. And then lastly is our Cannabis Training Academy. They work on credentialing and educational services for people and entrepreneurs looking to get into the cannabis industry as permitted by the laws that were passed a few years ago. So again, these are all free and confidential technical assistance programs that we offer, and it's for any size businesses in the state of New Jersey. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So the state plan, again, move on to the next slide. And I say in advance, I know I see several people that have seen my presentation over the last week or two, so apologies for having to listen to me again. But hopefully there's a little bit more detail on the freight and logistics industry and how the state plan interacts with that going forward. So the State Planning Act was adopted as a piece of companion legislation to the Fair Housing Act as part of the Mount Laurel decision. So the legislature decided if there's going to be this obligation to build more housing units throughout the state, there should be a guidance document that guides where growth should occur in New Jersey. So it tries to balance a lot of different competing needs, making sure we promote opportunities for housing, for economic development and job growth, but as well as protecting the things that make New Jersey the Garden State. So how do we protect our open spaces and our farmland resources, as well as our historic resources? So the act lays out several different goals: protecting our natural resources, promoting development and redevelopment in the appropriate places. And the key, in my opinion, of the act is considering input from all the partners that we deal with. So not only state government, the local and county government, as well as other regional planning entities and the public, to make sure everyone's input is in this process and we're coordinating plans at all levels of government. So we're all moving in the same direction when we're making investment and planning decisions. The act calls us to identify growth areas and limited growth areas, areas that for preservation of farmland and open space, and a whole host of other policies and recommendations and considerations when making planning decisions and investment decisions in New Jersey. So if you move on to the next slide, a couple of things. There is a misconception that the state plan is a regulatory document. It is not. It is not. The act clearly states that the state plan and the State Planning Commission cannot negate or override any adopted master plan or local zoning ordinance. So this is more of a guidance document. It's a broad policy framework to coordinate planning decisions, and it does not take away local control from zoning and master planning responsibilities of our municipal and county partners. And it's also not only for our municipal and county partners and to use the state plan and guide their decisions, but also for state agencies to use for them to shape their functional plans, where they're making investment decisions, and any of the administrative rules or regulatory actions they take are supposed to be informed and be consistent with the state plan as they implement their various legislative responsibilities. So in order to update the plan, we go through a process. If you move on to the next slide. It's called the cross-acceptance process, and that's outlined in the State Planning Act and the state planning rules of how we go about updating the plan. So the process of cross-acceptance is how we compare the statewide planning policies that are in the draft state plan with the plans and ordinances and regulations of all our local planning partners, as well as our state agency partners, to identify areas of consistency and inconsistency, with the goal of trying to get to the highest level of consistency possible. So I've been doing this long enough that I know that all 560 plus municipalities, 21 counties, 20 plus state agencies, and the general public are never going to agree on everything 100%. But the idea is to shape the plans based on a back and forth between all the planning partners that are at the table to come to the highest level of consensus possible. So in order to do that, there's a couple different phases of cross-acceptance. So this is what we did over the last year and a half to get to this point to adopt the plan back in December. So in early December of 2024, we released the preliminary draft of the State Development and Redevelopment Plan. Shortly thereafter, we held 22 public meetings, one with each county and the Highlands Council, to take comments and answer questions about the preliminary draft plan. And then we partner with the county. So 20 of the 21 counties took on the role of serving as a negotiating entity, as the go-between between the state and our local planning partners. So they compared the county plans with the state plan, as well as municipal plans with the state plan, identified those areas of consistency and inconsistency, as well as identifying potential requested changes to the plan. They did that over the course of the winter and spring, and in the end of May, the counties submitted their cross-acceptance report. And I have to also, the Highlands Council also did that for the towns in the Highlands Council region. So at the end of May, they submitted their cross-acceptance responses. In the beginning of June, my small but mighty team went through all those responses and identified all the potential changes that were requested of the plan. Then we had, in the end of June, we met with all 21 counties and the Highlands Council to go work out what we call a negotiation agenda, where we listed all the different topics that would be discussed to make sure we didn't miss anything from any requested changes or concerns that the counties wanted and the municipalities wanted to speak about when we had the actual negotiation sessions. So in July, we had 22 negotiation sessions, again, one with each county and the Highlands Council to go through all those requested changes. And that resulted in statements of agreements and disagreements. So there was a draft of that report and a final report of all the statements of agreements and disagreements. And whoever came up with that term, did a good acronym. So this was we refer to as the SAD document. But and maybe in the past, that's how it was because there wasn't that level of coordination and consistency or collaboration. But out of this process, the state agreed to make about 98% of the changes that were requested to the state plan. So we did all that through the month of July. So, and so from the end of July to mid-August, my team took all those comments and then made the changes and updated the plan based on the discussions we had with all our planning partners. We also, the State Planning Commission adopted an impact assessment report, which is required by the act that I'll talk about in a little bit, but that really quantified the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the state plan, and we used those findings to make additional changes to the plan. Then we released the final draft of the SDRP, which is the State Development Redevelopment Plan, as well as a draft infrastructure needs assessment. Those were released in early September. And then from early September to December 3rd was a public comment period where we took public comments on both draft of those documents. And then we also held 6 public hearings in October to take comment on those plans. So when the public comment period ended on December 3rd, our team went into overdrive, making any additional changes to the plan to present to the State Planning Commission. We sent them a draft on December 10th, and then on December 17th at their regular State Planning Commission meeting, we took additional comments on the plan and testimony on the plan and adopted a final State Development Redevelopment Plan and Infrastructure Needs Assessment. Again, first time since March of 2001, there is a new state plan. So I went over all those timelines because in the past, this process took 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 years to get through that process. We did it within a year and a half, almost 2 years from when the plan was initially drafted to when it was out. And, about a year from December to December, when the draft plan was released till we finalized it. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without all the support of our county partners and all our municipal planning partners that participate in the process. So I just want to thank everyone, all the counties for all their hard work that went into this, because without their participation and engagement, as well as our local planning partners that engaged in this process, as well as the general public and our state agency and other regional planning partners, we would not have been able to get the plan done. So I just want to thank, put that out there so everyone kind of understand how much work was actually done to get us to this point. So let's go on to the next slide. So the impact assessment, per the act, we were required to do an independent assessment of the effectiveness of the state plan. So we hired Rutgers, and Rowan University was a lead with assistance from Rutgers. And they went through all the data that was collected over the last 20 plus years to kind of qualitatively and quantitatively review the analysis to see how effective the state plan has been. So one of the benefits of the plan not being updated in so many years is that there is a lot of data to show the trends that and the impact the state plan had. So I think if you look at what New Jersey was in March of 2001 and where we are now, New Jersey, the data showed that New Jersey would be a much different place without the State Development and Redevelopment Plan. Even though it's a guidance document, it aligns some planning decisions. So while we're still losing some open space and farmland and still having development in sometimes environmentally sensitive or climate risk areas, those trends, the amount of land being lost is dramatically lower. At that time in 2001, there wasn't the redevelopment revolution and all the reinvestment in our already developed areas that were going on. TOD development wasn't really happening. All those policies are in the state plan promoting the reinvestment in our urban and developed areas. So you look at those trends, again, New Jersey would be much different than what it was. Would much different today if we didn't have the state plan. So we identified taking those findings, we tweaked some of the policies for the draft final plan to make sure we were trying to get to limiting growth in environmentally sensitive and climate risk areas going forward. So trying to address those trends as best we can and strengthen some of the preservation policies in the plan. So if you go on to the next slide, the new state plan, there's 10 goals in the state plan. 2 of them are new. There's a climate change goal as well as an equity goal. And the other changes we made to the final plan, we updated a lot of the mapping criteria. As you know, there's a state plan policy map, which is the geographic representation of the plan's policies that identifies growth areas and preservation areas. We tweaked a lot of those policies to make it a little bit more nimble and flexible. The commission really wanted to make sure the map reflected the reality that was on the ground and what was being planned for. So we added a section on climate change to the mapping criteria so we could identify areas that have current or future flood risk or climate risks and make sure we're making appropriate planning decisions for those areas. We strengthened the definition of what a center is. Centers are the compact mixed-use development concentrations of growth where we're trying to concentrate growth to occur. Cores are the areas of the main street or the central business district of centers, so making very sure we clearly defined what those are. We tweaked some of the planning criteria. In the past, we were like the planning area had to be a square mile or more. And so there's areas that met the criteria, but since it was like 3/4 of a square mile, it was planning area 4 instead of planning area 2, which it really should have been. So that gives a little bit more flexibility to make sure the map is reflecting what real world conditions. We added 2 new planning areas, planning area 1B and 2B. Those are developed areas that have current or future climate risks, mostly flooding. So when we were working through the plan endorsement process with our other stage D partners, sometimes there was a desire for places that were developed that were flooding now or flooding in the future to be mapped as planning area 5, which is the environmentally sensitive area. That didn't make sense to me and to the team of mapping the Port of Newark that has future flood risk as planning area 5 and treating it as it was undeveloped land with wetlands and all that just doesn't make sense. The same with Atlantic City or Jersey City or Lambertville or so on and so forth. Places that have current flooding risks are not, and that are developed, are not planning area 5. So the planning area 1B and 2B allows that the designation of those areas, and there's probably going to be areas for the state where it makes sense to do resiliency improvements and harden those communities, the ones that are more of mixed use areas and serve as center-like activity nodes versus pure single use areas where maybe those are areas targeted for future buyout and moving people out of harm's way in the future. So that's the idea with the 1B and 2B is to start those conversations about the future of those developed areas. We also want to map all preserved lands on the state plan policy map. Preservation of our agriculture and open space resources is one of the key goals of the plan. So we want to map all preserved land, be it open space or preserved farmland on the map, to identify those concentrations of those uses and those preservation areas, and create larger contiguous swaths of preserved land and filling in holes in the donut. And then we updated the critical environmental sites and the cultural and historic sites to make sure smaller areas that either had significant historic significance or environmental features that are less than a square mile, that we can map those. Special resource areas are areas that have such unique and critical resources, either economic, social, or environmental, that really warrant a higher level of oversight, similar to the Pinelands or the Meadowlands or the Highlands Council. So there's a process in the plan that'll be able to recognize those areas and recognize, with the intent of those areas being recognized, that they would be some sort of legislative action to help oversee the planning of those areas. We also added using this plan section to make it very clear this is a guidance document, and it's not intended to be a one-size-fits-all document. So we added some language that, there's the 10 goals. You can prioritize implementation of those goals based on your local priorities and local existing conditions. But you can prioritize, but we still expect you to meet the intent of all 10 goals. And we had a lot of comments that the plan was very heavy on the urban emphasis. So we added a lot of strategies to address planning issues in our suburban and rural areas of the state. So if you move on to the next slide, there are 10 goals of the state development and redevelopment plan. So I'm not going to read through all that's on the slides, but there's an economic development goal, a housing goal. You move on to the next slide, please. There's an infrastructure goal, revitalization and recentering. That's really supporting redevelopment opportunities and focusing growth in areas that already have existing infrastructure and public water, sewer, and the like. There's the climate change goal. You move on. There is a protecting our natural water resources. So that's a preservation goal, addressing water quality and air quality, addressing pollution and environmental cleanup issues. It's very heavy. There's a lot of strategies in the plan of addressing lead in drinking water, brownfields redevelopment, and some new language about waste management, recycling facilities and facilities similar to that, making sure we're mitigating the impacts on the surrounding communities and not, forcing more of that type of use in overburdened communities. Next slide. There's also protecting our historic and scenic resources. New Jersey is, key to the history of this country with the 250th anniversary occurring this year. So how do we build off those great historic and scenic and cultural resources that we have to create other economic activities? So making sure we're protecting all those resources and also doubling down on preserving more land through farmland and open space preservation activities. Equity, making sure that everyone has a voice in the planning process and making sure that no one is being left behind. So if it's an urban, suburban, or rural area, irregardless of demographic, if there's been underinvestment in those areas or lack of opportunity, how can we make sure all those places have an opportunity to grow, as well as advancing the tenets of the environmental justice laws that were passed a few years ago. Again, trying to make sure everyone has a voice in the planning process going forward. The last slide on the goals is our comprehensive planning goal. So that's just really promoting good regional planning efforts, good local planning efforts, there's some urban design recommendations in the report, and also how do we interact with the other state agencies that have regional planning responsibilities, like the Pinelands, the Hackensack Meadowlands, the Highlands Coalition Council, Fort Monmouth, and the Casino Reinvestment Authority. How do our plans tie into those and vice versa, and making sure we're all moving in the same direction. So next slide. Of particular interest for how this relates back to the Freight Initiatives Committee, there are several goals in the economic development strategy and recommendations and strategies here. So you could see talking about moving goods safely and efficiently throughout New Jersey's ports, airports, rail systems, and roads is one of the key recommendations and key strategy in our economic development section. But also making sure that any of these large industrial facilities that are developed are consistent with the environmental justice law, and we're putting the right transportation infrastructure and supporting those type of investments to lessen the negative impacts of any of these land uses and making sure that it's an efficient system that doesn't impact, or any of our overburdened communities or any communities in general, to make sure we're, promoting quality communities throughout New Jersey. We talk about the importance of our public use airports, not only for travel, but for goods movement and trade, as well as the importance of maintaining and investing in our maritime facilities and handling of water-dependent uses. So again, the state plan is a very high-level policy framework document, but you can see that the goods industry the goods movement industry is critical to New Jersey's future success. So there are several policies in there that guide future state investments and for opportunities for us to collaborate with the three metropolitan planning organizations to move these policies forward through the regional transportation plan. So I see us being able to do even more work together in the coming years of making sure we're addressing these issues through all our coordinated planning efforts. And then the next slide is the state plan policy map. Again, this is the geographic representation of all those policies of the state plan. So identifying where the growth areas are and where the preservation areas are. We did not initiate any map changes through cross acceptance that were initiated by the state. We asked our county and municipal partners to identify potential mapping changes. We had about 1,500 of those. The commission decided, since we were potentially changing some of the policies and the criteria in the plan, that it would be premature to act upon those changes during the cross acceptance process. So we delayed them until after the adoption of the plan. So right now we're going through all those mapping changes and we're working with the counties and towns over the course of the next year to address and analyze all those and make the changes as appropriate. So next slide is the infrastructure needs assessment. So this was headed up by Rutgers University and our friends at the Voorhees Transportation Center. So they gathered all the various capital plans and regulatory framework agencies, where anything that talked about future infrastructure needs. They did a huge data dump and looked at all those reports and then forecasted future needs based on the findings of those reports and the documents they reviewed, as well as demographic changes and other trends in asset depreciation and a whole host of other things, to identify basically 3 scenarios to project the infrastructure needs of the state. So there's a steady state scenario, and that's kind of, we continue implementing the plan as is, like in the same rate and the same level of intensity. And then if we moderately increase the implementation of the plan, what those needs would be. And then if we are to fully implement the plan, what those infrastructure needs would be. So these infrastructure needs are for like the next 5 to 10 years in that kind of time frame. So you can see with the steady state, it's only $102 billion worth of infrastructure needs. And now all these infrastructure needs, it ranges from transportation, energy, school facilities, libraries, public health and safety, and a range of other things, farmland preservation. So it takes all those are under this infrastructure needs assessment. So to have moderate progress in implementing a state plan, we roughly need $214 billion. And then if we were to fully implement the goals of the state plan over the next 5-10 years, we just need $317 roughly billion. So I think the importance of these numbers are why they're very large. It kind of shows the importance of making sure we're making the right investment decisions and also investing in projects that have multiple benefits with the limited infrastructure dollars that we have. So this is kind of to keep in mind of what's going to be needed to fully realize the benefits of the state development and redevelopment plan. So if you go on to the next slide, the state plan recognizes the need to provide guidance and technical assistance on how to implement the various policies of the plan. So right before we started working on the plan, the commission developed a distribution, warehousing, and goods movement guidelines. So this report was available adopted in 2022, and it outlines various policies to kind of make sure, like, how do you plan for these types of uses going forward? What are the considerations that municipalities should be looking at to try to be proactive rather than reactive to these things? How do you balance all those competing needs from neighborhoods, from the residents, from the development community, and really encouraging a regional approach to the planning and siting of these logistics facilities? So the guidance document has a whole series of different subchapters in there to talk about different things, from best practices to like what types of warehouses are out there, issues you should be looking at for traffic and road safety. How do you engage the public through community engagement, and public participation? How do you design them to be sustainable going forward? So our goal is, we got comments on updating this document, so as well as creating additional guidance documents of how to become more climate resilient, or for how do you address affordable housing needs or support TOD development in your community. So we plan, in the coming year, to update this document as well as create some of those new guidance documents moving forward. So I view this as another opportunity when we start to begin to update, especially this guidance document, of involving all 3 of the MPOs, since you're all dealing with freight and logistics issues and have your regional transportation plan. So I think this is a really good opportunity for us to partner and have some statewide guidance that can be like filtered in and better integrated into the regional planning efforts, then hopefully better integrated to local and county plans. So this is kind of my pitch today, is I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to work together in the coming months and years on implementing the plan. And then the next slide, I think, is my last one. Is really, these are the things we're doing to implement the plan. So it's a priority of the Sherrill administration as well as the State Planning Commission to advance the goals and strategies of this plan. So we're going to, again, update existing and create new guidance documents. The plan endorsement process is a process the towns and counties can voluntarily go through to gauge their consistency with the state plan and then identify things to increase that consistency. And by doing so, this is a partnership where the state can provide additional resources to help address those plans, so technical assistance, but also being an endorsed plan gives you some benefits for extra points on grant applications or eligibility for various programs. The key one that gets everyone's attention is, in order to be eligible for the various economic development tax credit investment offered by the state through the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, the Aspire and Emerge programs. In order to be eligible to participate in those programs, you need to be in planning area 1 or 2 or have a designated center. So if you're not in planning area 1 or 2, but you have an area that is more mixed use development and is targeted for growth in your local plans, we can designate a center in those areas, and then you can become eligible for those programs. I mentioned we were going to address all the 1,500 map changes that we were requested, that we deferred until now. State agency coordination, that was a big thing we heard throughout the update process, of enhancing state agency coordination amongst state agencies and our local planning partners at the county and municipalities. I joked that if I had $1 for every time that came up, I could have retired with my predecessor, Donna Rendera, when she retired in February of last year. I could have retired with her based on the number of times that agency coordination came up. So being on the other side of the fence for so many years, I see where there's opportunities to enhance the efficiency and coordination opportunities so we can get to yes quicker on some of these bigger issues and address some of the needs that our municipalities have working with our state agency partners. And then also we're here to support local and regional planning efforts. The State Planning Commission and my office can help facilitate these regional discussions. So if it's a regional greenway or regional trail system, those types of things, or any sort of regional planning effort, we can provide some technical assistance. I don't have any grant money, but I have really talented staff that I can help facilitate and be a convener to talk about these issues. And I will talk to anyone who wants to learn about the state plan and know how it could help you advance your local planning goals, and your local planning priorities. So I want us to be out there and talking to a wide range of stakeholders of what the plan is and how it can be a benefit, because that's honestly one of the reasons I took this job. I loved what I was doing at Somerset County, but the opportunity to come and replicate some of the successes that we had at Somerset at the statewide level, since Somerset really integrated a lot of the policies of the state plan and really helped the counties, municipalities advance their local goals that happen to be consistent with the county and the state plan. A lot of success that came out of that. So that's why I took this on. So I do not want this plan to sit on the shelf. I want it to be used. I want to address some of the issues that came up and make this planning process as best we can in New Jersey. So I think that my actual last slide is how you can find the plan. So there's the QR codes for the new state plan, as well as the warehouse guidance document, and all the documents from cross acceptance and the plan update process, are all on the website. So I neglected to, we figured out over the course of that last year, the amount of engagement that we did during the plan update process. We had over 145 meetings that we talked with different people about the state development, redevelopment plan, and engaged with over 4,000 different stakeholders. So there was a lot of effort that went into that document to develop that in that short amount of time. So I think that the plan will serve us well going forward. So looking forward to opportunities to partner with everyone, not only at the NJTPA, but our local planning partners as well. So thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Walter. We're going to take questions. There's some in the chat box. I'm actually going to take the liberty of asking the first question of you, Walter, and that is, it's actually two-pronged. What is the time frame for this state plan? When is it envisioned it will be changed in the future? And the state agency coordination, in the beginning you mentioned the plan is a guidance document, but my understanding is that if you're looking for a DEP permit, you're not consistent with the state plan, that permit could be withheld. So coordination really puts teeth into the state plan, in my perspective on that. Could you address that as well?
Sure. So the plan is for 2050. So it's a vision for the next 25 plus years. Per the State Planning Act, the plan is supposed to be updated every 3 years. But as the track record hasn't happened. So we did a lot of stuff in the plan to try to make it evergreen. So not necessarily reference every law and regulation by name, but also that there might be new regulations that come online. So trying to make this evergreen. So in case the plan is not updated for another 10 or 15 years, there's still that flexibility for the commission to implement those goals, working and address needs that our planning partners bring up in the future. And the state agency coordination. So yes, the state agencies use the plan, implement the plan through their regulations. But again, the plan is not a regulatory document. So, I'm trying to reset some of these conversations with our state agencies, because I feel sometimes they may not be fully aligned with the plan. So this is, I think, a great opportunity with the new administration that really wants to improve the efficiency of government and enhance coordination. I've said numerous times to the lieutenant governor and other members of the administration, like the state plan is a roadmap, a toolbox to address a lot of those concerns. So I can bring my state agency partners to the table to advocate for changes, but I cannot direct the state agency to grant a permit and all that. But I can argue on behalf of our local planning partners if they're feeling like the plan is being I don't want to say misused, but misinterpreted on the intent of the goals and the strategies.
All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Sophia to handle the Q&A. So we've got quite a few questions in the chat box here.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So first question is for Tom, and I'm going to kind of reframe this. The first question was, is Amazon considered a 3PL? And can you talk a little bit about what a 3PL is specifically for the people on this call? And then detailed questions about what kind of different 3PLs there are, domestic versus international, how that affects operation, modes, lead times, deliveries, and sorting.
Awesome. All right. So is Amazon a 3PL? Yes. Are they a retailer? Yes. Are they a grocer? Yes. Are they a data center? Yes. Amazon is everything. And however you want to put it in the which bucket they fall under is really where we manipulate statistics. But for the statistics that I put on the screen and how we treat them in our business, they're considered a domestic 3PL. They have multiple ways of being a 3PL, and this is where you kind of get into the multiple layers of individual companies and how they operate a facility. Each facility is very different parking ratios, different door counts, different ceiling heights, different power needs. I didn't even discuss power, but power in the state is becoming a massive problem. It's very costly. So high level, you have fulfillment centers. Those are your big behemoths. Think, hundreds of thousands of square feet. They import a lot of big bulk items from either the port or rail or what have you. Then it gets down to the next level, which is your sortation centers. They accept from fulfillment centers. These are hands-on, starting to get more automated. Then from there, it goes a step further into more of your delivery centers. Amazon calls them their last mile facilities. That's where they get loaded onto, UPS trucks, FedEx trucks, your Amazon fulfillment, vehicles that goes to your home and stuff like that. Then you have Amazon specialty centers. They have those pickup drop-off locations, typically very heavy on your parking ratios. for passenger vehicles. And then they have what their new rollout is for probably the rest of this year and the next couple of years. You'll hear the term SSD, which is your same day centers. Sorry, same day. So we're not just talking about same day, we're talking about same day. I order something, I want it at my door less than 5 hours. Yes, it's happening. Yes, it's rolling out very, very fast across the United States. Why are they doing this? Well, there's a company called Uni Uni. They're an Asian-based 3PL. I opened up about 70 locations in the last 12 months for them with my team across the country. They are looking to dominate that market. They are a behemoth and they operate very, very efficiently. So that kind of answers the 3PL questions. I mean, happy to dive down further, but just a quick summary, every facility is different. Every operation within the facility is different. And they all have different requirements and needs. And definitely is something you can get a good education on.
Thanks, Tom. And so everyone's aware, 3PL stands for a third-party logistics provider.
Yes.
Next question for Walter was, when the plan was first initiated, it touted a carrot and stick approach. Has this approach been abandoned?
No, it's very much, I say, many of my presentations that the plan has a lot of carrots, but not a lot of sticks. So it's really trying to encourage the coordination, voluntary coordination of these planning efforts and really show. And again, I'll use my Somerset County experience by what the county did. And I'm not saying this because Commissioner Sui is on the call, is that by aligning those decisions, we were able to advance not only the county's priorities, but state priorities and the local planning priorities, and making it easier to grow in the right places and discourage growth in the places where we're not. So it's really setting a proactive vision for the future. And the state plan kind of creates a broader framework to do that in. And, to Commissioner Shaw's questions, I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of improve that coordination between state agencies and sometimes like we made some of the changes to the planning area criteria because towns and counties were kind of on this hamster wheel they couldn't get off. Like you couldn't be a center because you didn't have sewers, but you couldn't have center because you didn't have sewer. So that's why we redid the planning area criteria to kind of break that cycle and say, if you're planning for growth in the center-based development, then we should be making sure the permitting decisions are made to support that. And then, but also the permanent decisions to discourage growth that is inconsistent with that vision. So that's kind of how we start to set some of these conversations with the various permitting agencies throughout the state.
Walter, you can compliment Somerset County anytime you like. And great job. Good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you, Commissioner.
Question for Tom. Did you notice an increased interest in FTZ facilities last year as a result of the tariff policy?
Great question. Yes, we saw a ton of people asking if there's available space in current FTZ zones. Not just here, but in ports around the country, specifically Savannah, Charleston, who's a very aggressive port right now trying to grow. The problem was timing. As everyone probably knows on this call, getting anything approved does not take a week. It takes a month. And our lovely government was changing tariffs daily. So, we had clients come to us and say, hey, I need, I got, 40 containers that I need placed somewhere. We're like, I need an FTZ zone. I don't want to pay this. I don't want and then I'd be like, great, find them a location. And they were like, how long is this going to take? And I go, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, best case scenario. They're like, what? That doesn't work for me. So unfortunately, yes, we saw a ton of interest in it, had to educate a lot of people on it. The people that did have available space took advantage of a lot of customers that had no other avenue to go in. And we actually saw a lot of rerouting back to China. We saw a lot of rerouting to other ports. Houston was a big beneficiary of it. Other ports that had a little bit liberal zoning laws.
Thanks. And could you talk a little bit more about foreign trade zones and how they work just within the goods movement?
Sure. So the main thing to understand about an FTZ is when you pay your taxes, or when you pay taxes on those goods. So as you accept goods into the foreign trade zone. It's a typically kind of like a custom bonded style warehouse. It's highly secure. It's regulated. That's why it takes so long to get approved. You don't pay taxes on those goods. If they're returned back to Asia or Europe or wherever they came from. So if they're a return and they don't leave that little zone, you don't pay any taxes on them. And you don't pay tax on them until they leave that zone. So theoretically, you can leave them there for months until the tariff resolution was resolved. So that was the real crux and interest of why people were looking at them. The problem is that most customers that were asking about them were never educated and understood the process. So it was more of a learning exercise for a lot of them than anything. Go forward, I do think there's a lot of benefit to them, and it could create a advantage for certain municipalities and for certain owners that do have that designation. It does come with a lot of paperwork and headache, but I think we're all realizing less paperwork in our lives is better. So I do think it's something that we'll look out for. In this region, I think other ports probably would do better than us.
Question for, well, have you or do you plan to involve the industry in your process?
Yes. So when we begin the update of the warehouse guidance document, I'm envisioning that we have some sort of outreach to our industry partners, as well as to like this group. I would love to be able to come back and share like an updated draft with the group and say and get some feedback, because I'm a big believer in getting his input from as many people as we can to make it the best document. Now, I can't guarantee that everyone's going to be happy with the document, with the final recommendations, but the idea is the more input we have, I think we'll make a better document and hopefully greater buy-in. And I think, again, working with the MPOs on this type of project would be really great to kind of then be able to seed into your regional transportation plans, which get updated on a much more regular basis than the state plan. So how we can actionize and really get to implementation. Because if this plan sits on the shelf, then all that hard work is not going to be as valuable as it could be.
Absolutely, and I look forward to working together on this. I actually have some additional questions. So question for you, Tom, is what do you think the future of Class B and C warehouses are?
That's a loaded question. Thank God a lot of my clients aren't on this call. I think if you own a Class B or Class C warehouse, you need to be prepared to have a lot of cash reserves, because you're going to have to modernize your facility in some way. Now, there will always be a tenant out there that requires space in New Jersey or wants to be, doesn't need a Class A facility, for instance. A lot of the stuff in and around outside New York City, we call the Meadowlands submarket, Carlstead, East Rutherford, Hudson County, Bergen County kind of colliding there. There's a lot of Class B. It's a majority of our inventory. Probably about 85% of our inventory is Class B or under. It's going to need a significant amount of expenditure because we're not seeing the rental growth. And if you don't see rental growth, you're going to see lack of, liquidity in the sale market, which will then drive investment away into other parts of the industry. So I would say it's a struggle. The problem is that a lot of the facilities require more land, and just they're on, their prior, I'll use the Meadowlands as an example. They were all designed as, not needing, large car parking ratios or significant truck courts. They only have 80-foot truck courts, and the truck's 53-foot wide and loads in the street. It becomes a major issue. And you just don't attract quality tenants. So then you get your bottom feeders of the world who you really don't want in your municipality.
Great, thanks. That's a good overview. And then question for you, Walt, is you talk about cores and recentering. What do you think goods movement will look like in a New Jersey that has much more density in that type?
So I think, the Class B space, if that gets redeveloped, there's opportunities for other, maybe not logistics needs, but for housing or other, advanced manufacturing or those types of things. So the goal of the state plan is to kind of funnel that growth into areas that already have that existing infrastructure. So the transportation network there. Power, water, and sewer is there. Access to workforce is there. So how do we make, build off those previous public investments to get more bang in return for that investment? So I think, just like, the repurposing of older Class B office spaces and underutilized retail, that's really what the state plan is trying to do. Put all those underutilized assets to a better, higher productive use, and doing that in a manner that's supporting compact mixed-use development opportunities. Obviously, there's areas that are need for, so the state plan also has a designation for nodes. So those are like single-use areas. So a town can designate a node if they go through the plan endorsement process, and there's some benefits for review and all that for permitting, but it could be a logistics node, it could be a manufacturing node, it could be a commercial node. So trying to coordinate those planning efforts and looking at some of the broader regional pictures is really what we're trying to accomplish with the plan.
You're muted, Sophia.
Apologies. Thank you. And another question from the chat was, how do you spell the Chinese company Booney Booney?
Uni Uni.
Uni. There it is.
Uni Uni. UNI-UNI. And if anybody wants to have a follow-up conversation with me about the Asian 3PL community, I am more than happy to spend as much time as you guys want. It is something that I know doesn't get a lot of press and talking about because of the word China. It gets kind of ugly and crazy, but understanding the real players in that game and the pretenders, because there's also a lot of, I'll say, bad players out there who have defaulted on leases. They're not, showing good balance sheets. It is, and it can be very challenging to unravel. So happy to help anybody out.
All right, thank you for that. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat box. I'll throw one last time to committee members if there's any additional questions from any committee members. Speak now. All right, not seeing any. I just want to thank everybody for a very, very interesting discussion. This is always a great